The card was declined. Insufficient funds, the cashier said, her voice laced with a pity I didn't yet understand. A flush of heat crept up my neck. It had to be a mistake. A system glitch. Mark and I were meticulous savers. That account, our joint savings, was our future. It held the down payment for the little house with the garden, the one we'd drive by on Sundays. It held 5 years of skipped vacations, of packed lunches and carefully budgeted groceries. I tried our debit card instead. Same result, same apologetic frown from the cashier. I left the full cart behind, murmuring an apology, and walked out into the cold air, my hands trembling as I dialed the bank. The automated voice was cheerful, impersonal, as it delivered the news that shattered my world in a single, sterile sentence. The balance was less than $100. The drive home was a blur. My mind raced, searching for a logical explanation. A bank error, identity theft, anything but the one possibility that was slowly, dreadfully taking shape in the pit of my stomach. I walked into our apartment, and the first thing I saw was the brochure for the house on the coffee table. Its glossy photo of the sun-drenched porch seemed to mock me. Mark was on the couch, scrolling through his phone, oblivious. He looked up and smiled. "Hey, you're back early." I couldn't speak. I just held my purse, the useless plastic cards inside feeling heavy as stones. "What's wrong?" he asked, his smile faltering as he finally registered the look on my face. I found my voice. It was thin, reedy. "The money, Mark, it's gone." He blinked. For a split second, I saw it in his eyes. Not surprise, not concern, guilt, pure, unadulterated guilt. And in that second, I knew it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a thief, it was him. "What are you talking about?" he said, but his voice lacked conviction. He was already building his walls. "Our savings," I said, my own voice growing stronger, colder. "The house fund, all of it, it's gone. I just called the bank." He stood up then, running a hand through his hair. He wouldn't look at me. He walked over to the window, his back a rigid wall between us. Silence hung in the air, thick and suffocating. "Mark," I whispered. "Where is it?" He finally turned, and his expression was one I'd never seen before. It was a strange mix of defiance and pleading. "I had to, Jas. I didn't have a choice." A choice? A choice about what? The name, when it left his lips, felt like a physical blow. Clara. Clara, his ex-girlfriend. The one he always swore was just a friend now. The one whose name would pop up on his phone late at night, a name he would always explain away with a casual, "Oh, she's just having another drama." My blood ran cold. "Clara, what does she have to do with our savings?" "She was in trouble," he said, the words rushing out now. "Big trouble. She was about to lose everything. Her business, her apartment. I couldn't just stand by and watch that happen." I stared at him, my mind struggling to connect the dots. Her business, a little floral shop she'd opened a year ago. A business I now realized that was failing. "So you gave her our money?" I asked, the words feeling foreign and absurd on my tongue. "Our entire future." "It's a loan," he insisted, his voice rising. "She's going to pay it all back. She just needed a lifeline, Jasmine, to get back on her feet." But I could see the lie in the way his eyes darted away from mine. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that we would never see a cent of that money again. "How much, Mark?" He hesitated. It was what she needed. "How much?" He finally said the number, the full amount. Every last dollar we had sacrificed for. He had drained the account to zero. I sank onto the arm of the sofa, the strength leaving my legs. The room felt like it was tilting. "You didn't ask me," I said, the words barely a whisper. It was the only thought I could form. Not about the money, not about the house, but about the simple, profound betrayal. "You didn't even talk to me." His answer sealed my fate. It drew a line in the sand of our marriage that I knew could never be undrawn. "Because I knew you'd say no." He said it so simply. He admitted without shame that he knew it was a violation. He knew he was stealing from our shared life, from me, and he did it anyway. He chose her. He protected her dreams by sacrificing ours. I realized he wasn't just my husband anymore. He was a stranger who had been sleeping beside me. That's when I understood that the money was the least of what I had lost. The days that followed were lived in a thick, gray fog. We moved around each other in the small apartment like ghosts, the silence between us a living entity. Mark tried, in his own clumsy way, to breach it. He'd make coffee in the morning and leave a cup on my side of the counter, just as he always had. He'd text me in the middle of the day with a simple, "How are you?" as if a normal question could patch the gaping wound he'd torn in our life. I would reply with one-word answers. Fine. Okay. But I wasn't fine, I was drowning. Every corner of our home was a reminder of the future he had stolen. The paint swatches for the living room of the house we'd never buy. The little ceramic bird we'd bought on our first anniversary, meant to sit on the windowsill of our future kitchen. It sat on our bookshelf now, its cheerful blue paint feeling like a cruel joke. I told myself it didn't matter. It was just money. We were healthy. We had each other. But that was the lie, wasn't it? I didn't have him, not really. He had made his allegiance clear. He seemed to think my silence was a phase, a storm that would pass. He believed, I think, that one day I would just get over it, that my practicality and my love for him would eventually outweigh the betrayal. He was counting on it. He misjudged the depth of the wound. He saw it as a financial problem. I saw it as a moral one. He had proven that when faced with a choice between me and his past, he would choose the echo of an old love over the foundation of his current one. 2 weeks after that awful day, the final nail was driven into the coffin of my ignorance. I was scrolling aimlessly through social media, a habit I'd picked up to numb the constant ache in my chest. And then I saw it. A post from one of Clara's friends, tagging her. It was a picture of a grand reopening, a small, chic storefront with a brand new sign that read "Blooms by Clara." The shop looked completely renovated. New awnings, beautiful displays in the window, a line of smiling people waiting to get in. And there was Clara in the center of it all, cutting a large red ribbon with a pair of oversized scissors. She was beaming, radiant with success. The caption read, "So proud of my girl Clara for turning it all around. Sometimes all you need is a fresh start and a guardian angel to believe in you. Sky's the limit." A guardian angel. I felt the air leave my lungs. I zoomed in on the picture. I saw the custom floral arrangements, the expensive-looking interior design. This wasn't just a loan to cover some debts. This was a complete overhaul, a relaunch. He hadn't just given her a lifeline. He had bought her a brand new dream, our sacrifices, our future. It was all there, repurposed for her happiness, displayed behind a pane of glass on a sunny street I'd never walked down. I closed the app, my hand shaking so hard the phone clattered onto the table. Mark came out of the bedroom. What was that noise? I couldn't look at him. Nothing. He saw my face. "Jas, what is it? Are you okay?" His concern felt like acid. He was asking if I was okay while her triumph, funded by his deceit, was being celebrated all over town. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the chasm between us and the mattress. He was breathing deeply, peacefully, asleep, untroubled. How could he sleep? I slipped out of bed and walked into the living room. The moonlight cast long shadows across the floor. I picked up the little ceramic bird from the bookshelf. It was cool and smooth in my hand, a worthless little trinket, a symbol of a life that was now just a fantasy. I had been a fool. I had believed in our partnership. I had believed we were a team, building something together. But I was just the financier for his real life, the one that still revolved around her. I thought about my friends, my family. I wanted to call someone, to cry, to scream. But what would I say? My husband stole our life savings to give to his ex-girlfriend, and I'm still sleeping next to him. The shame was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I was completely, utterly alone in this. Mark had isolated me. He had put me on an island of his making, and he expected me to just sit there quietly until he decided to send a rescue boat. He didn't realize I was learning to swim. The next morning, he tried again. He came up behind me as I was making tea, wrapping his arms around my waist. "I miss you," he whispered into my hair. I flinched. Every nerve ending screamed. His touch felt like a violation. I pulled away gently. "I'm just tired," I said, my voice flat. "We can fix this, you know," he said, his tone earnest. "I'll work extra hours. We can build it back up. It'll take time, but we can do it. Together." Together, the word hung in the air. He was asking me to help him refill the well he had poisoned. He was asking me to sacrifice even more, to work even harder, to clean up the mess he made so that he could feel absolved. And the worst part, he genuinely saw nothing wrong with that request. In his mind, it was a perfectly reasonable solution. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no. I just nodded and took my tea to the other room. His assumption that I would simply fall back in line, that I would accept this new reality, was more insulting than the act itself. He hadn't just betrayed me, he fundamentally disrespected me. He saw me as a constant, a feature of his life that would always be there, no matter how badly he behaved. Predictable. Forgiving. That evening, I was looking for an insurance document in his home office. I rarely went in there. It was his space. His laptop was open on the desk, the screen glowing. I had never, not once in our 5 years together, looked at his private messages. It felt wrong, but something had already been broken. Trust had already been incinerated. A chat window was open. It was with Clara. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew I shouldn't look. I knew it would only bring more pain. But I couldn't stop myself. I had to know. I scrolled up, my breath catching in my throat. It was a long thread of messages, her endless gratitude, his casual reassurance. Her, I still can't believe it. You're my hero, Mark, you saved me. Him, it was nothing. You deserved a break. Then I saw the messages from last night. Her, is everything okay with Jasmine? I feel so guilty. I felt a surge of bitter laughter. She felt guilty. His reply is what stopped my heart. It's what changed everything. It's the sentence that would echo in my mind for months, becoming the fuel for a fire I didn't even know I had. Him, don't worry about it. She's mad now, but she'll get over it. She always does. She always does. He had me pegged. He had me categorized and filed away. The stable, predictable wife. The one who gets mad and then gets over it. The one who always forgives. He wasn't just dismissing my pain. He was telling another woman that my feelings were a temporary inconvenience, a minor bug in his operating system that would soon resolve itself. He saw my love not as a gift, but as a weakness he could exploit. I stood there in the dark, the screen's cold light illuminating the truth of my marriage. He hadn't just stolen our money for her. He had offered up my dignity as a sacrifice, too. He mocked my loyalty. He betrayed my trust. And he was so confident, so arrogant, that he believed I would just absorb the blow and carry on. I backed away from the desk slowly, without making a sound. I went back to the living room and stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. They all seemed so far away. The fog of grief and confusion began to lift, burned away by the clean, cold fire of clarity. The hurt was still there, a deep, resonant ache, but something else was taking root beside it. Something hard and quiet and unbending. Resolve. He was wrong about me. I wasn't a temporary problem to be managed. I wasn't a phase he could wait out. I was the woman whose future he had sold, and he had made the fatal mistake of underestimating me. He thought I would get over it. I realized he hadn't just given me a reason to leave. He had given me a reason to fight back. That night, I made a promise to myself. It wasn't a loud, dramatic vow. It was a silent contract, signed in the cold moonlight of our living room. He thought I would get over it. I promised myself I would get even, not in a loud, destructive way, but in a quiet, permanent way. A way he would never see coming. The first step was survival. I had to become an actress. The next morning, I woke up before him. I made coffee, just like always. When he came into the kitchen, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, I smiled. It was a small, fragile thing, a piece of glass I was holding carefully, but it was a smile. "Good morning," I said. He stopped, stunned. He was expecting the same icy silence he'd grown used to. He searched my face for a trick, for sarcasm, for tears. He found none. "Morning," he said, his voice cautious. "You slept okay." "I did actually," I lied. "First time in a while." I watched the relief wash over his face. It was so transparent, so selfish. He wasn't relieved for me, he was relieved for himself. The uncomfortable atmosphere was lifting. His prediction was coming true. Jasmine was getting over it, and so began my performance. I played the part of the wife who had decided to forgive. I let him hold my hand as we watched a movie. I laughed at his stupid jokes. I asked about his day at work. Each interaction was a carefully calculated move in a game only I knew we were playing. Each smile was a lie. Each moment of feigned normalcy was a stone I was laying for the path I intended to walk. Alone. He blossomed under my fake forgiveness. He became lighter, happier. He thought he had successfully navigated the storm and was now in the clear. He'd text me during the day again, sending little hearts and memes, as if the last few weeks had been nothing more than a bad dream. I would text back, matching his tone. but every time his name lit up my screen, I would look at the screenshot I had saved. The one of his message to Clara. Don't worry about it. She's mad now, but she'll get over it. She always does. It was my fuel, my scripture. My reminder that this performance was not a weakness, but a weapon. He thought my forgiveness was his victory. I knew it was his blindfold. While he was busy celebrating our reconciliation, I was working. My grandmother, a woman with a quiet strength I was only now beginning to understand, had left me something when she passed away years ago. It wasn't much in the grand scheme of things, but it was mine alone. A small portfolio of stocks, tucked away and forgotten. She had always called it my runaway fund. Every woman, she'd told me once, her voice raspy with age, needs to have a little getaway car parked around the corner. Not because you plan to leave, but so you always know you have the choice. At the time, I had laughed, secure in my love for Mark. I didn't need a runaway fund. Now, it was everything. I contacted a financial advisor, a woman named Sarah, who had been recommended by a friend. I sat in her sterile, professional office, feeling small and out of place. I told her the basics. That I had a personal portfolio I wanted to liquidate and reinvest. I left Mark out of it. This was my war, and I was the only soldier. Sarah was sharp and efficient. As she pulled up the numbers, her eyebrows shot up. The stocks, chosen with my grandmother's quiet wisdom decades ago, had grown. They had matured into a sum that was significant. Not enough to buy a skyscraper, but enough to make a difference. Enough, perhaps, to buy a small, unassuming commercial property. This is a very healthy nest egg, Jasmine, she said, looking at me over her glasses. What did you have in mind for the reinvestment? My heart was pounding. This was the moment it became real. Commercial real estate, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. A specific property, actually. I slid a piece of paper across her desk. On it was an address. The address of the building that housed Blooms by Clara. Sarah looked at it, then back at me, a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. This is a modest property, older building. Why this one? I had my story prepared. It's in an up-and-coming neighborhood. I think it's undervalued. She nodded, accepting the business logic, but I could tell she sensed there was more to it. She was a woman who understood subtext. All right, she said, tapping her pen on her notepad. The first step is to find out who owns it and if they're willing to sell. We should do this discreetly. We'll form a limited liability company for you, an anonymous name. That way, the owner won't know who's making the offer. It gives us a better negotiating position. An anonymous name, a new identity. The idea thrilled me. I wasn't just going to be Jasmine, the wife who gets over it. I was going to be the silent, unseen force of consequence. We spent the next hour mapping out the strategy, creating the LLC, transferring the funds, preparing the paperwork for a potential offer. I walked out of that office feeling taller. The fog of victimhood was gone. I had a plan, a purpose. That night, Mark suggested we go out for dinner. To celebrate, he said, smiling at me across the kitchen. Celebrate what? I asked, my voice light. Us. Getting through this, I know it was hard. I'm so sorry, Jas. I promise I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you. His words were smooth, practiced. He was saying what he thought I needed to hear. I smiled and agreed to dinner. We went to a nice restaurant, the kind we hadn't been to in years because we were saving. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. He ordered an expensive bottle of wine. To us, he said, raising his glass. A fresh start. I raised my glass, the crystal cool against my fingers. I looked him in the eye and touched my glass to his. To a fresh start. He had no idea whose fresh start we were toasting. The next few weeks were an exercise in patience. I continued my performance at home, playing the part of the forgiving wife. In my secret life, I was the CEO of my own quiet revenge. Sarah's research revealed something incredible. The building wasn't owned by a large corporation. It was owned by an elderly man who had inherited it from his father and was tired of the hassle of being a landlord. He lived 2 states away and, according to Sarah's discreet inquiries, was more than ready to sell. He just hadn't gotten around to listing it. It was a stroke of luck that felt like destiny. Like my grandmother's runaway fund was meant for this exact purpose. We put together an offer. It was fair, slightly above market value to make it an easy yes. The offer was submitted under the name of the LLC, JG Holdings, my initials, Jasmine's grandmother, a little nod to the woman who had armed me for this battle without even knowing it. Then came the waiting. It was the hardest part. Every day, I'd check my email, my heart leaping at every notification. At home, Mark was blissfully unaware. He had started talking about saving again. "We can rebuild it faster this time," he'd say, full of false optimism. "Maybe in 3 years, we can start looking for a house again." I would nod and agree, all the while knowing that our future was a fiction I was no longer willing to co-author. One afternoon, I was cleaning out a closet, a task I'd been avoiding. In the back, on the top shelf, was a small, dusty box. Inside were relics from our early life together. Old movie ticket stubs, dried flowers, a few faded photographs, and at the bottom, the little ceramic bird. I picked it up. Its cheerful blue glaze was covered in a thin layer of dust. I wiped it clean with my thumb. This little object had once represented so much hope, so much shared joy. Now, it felt like evidence from a crime scene, a life that had been murdered. I didn't feel sad looking at it. I felt nothing. It was just a thing. An artifact from a museum I no longer visited. I closed the box and put it in a larger bin destined for donation. I was shedding my old life, piece by piece. A week later, the email I had been waiting for arrived. I was at work, sitting at my desk. The subject line was simple: offer on Elm Street property. My hands trembled as I opened it. The words swam before my eyes. "We are pleased to inform you that the owner has accepted your offer." I read the sentence 3 times. A wave of something, not joy, not triumph, but a profound, grounding sense of power washed over me. I owned it. I owned the building. I owned the foundation on which her new, stolen dream was built. I was Clara's landlord. I took a deep breath, closed the email, and went back to work. No one around me knew that my entire world had just tilted on its axis. It was my secret, my victory. That night, Mark came home with a bouquet of flowers. Not a grand, expensive arrangement, just a simple bunch of daisies from the supermarket. "I was thinking of you," he said, handing them to me. I looked at the cheap, cellophane-wrapped bouquet, and I thought of the artisanal, overpriced arrangements Clara was probably selling in her beautiful, renovated shop. A shop that now, effectively, belonged to me. He thought this small gesture was enough. A few dollars worth of daisies to paper over a betrayal that had cost me my entire future. The condescension of it all was breathtaking. He had no idea that I had just made the biggest purchase of my life. He was handing me a fistful of weeds while I was holding the deed to the whole garden. I took the flowers and smiled my practice smile. "Thank you, honey. They're lovely." I put them in a vase, the one we'd gotten as a wedding gift. As I arranged them, I looked at my reflection in the dark kitchen window. My face was calm. My hands were steady. The woman looking back at me was not the same one who had cried in her car outside the grocery store. That woman was gone. This woman had a runaway fund, an LLC, and a plan. Mark came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. The same gesture he'd made weeks ago that had made my skin crawl. This time I didn't flinch. I leaned back into him, letting him believe everything was perfect. "I love you," he whispered. "I know," I said, and in my mind I finished the sentence. "And that was your biggest mistake." The closing was scheduled for a month later. An eternity. I had to maintain the illusion for 30 more days. It was the final act of my performance. I focused on the details. I talked to Sarah and the lawyers. I read every line of the contracts. I learned about commercial leases, property taxes, and tenant rights. I was becoming an expert in the field of my own revenge. Clara's lease, I learned, was up for renewal in 6 months. She had a 5-year lease with the old owner, with an option to renew for another 5, but only at the landlord's discretion. The discretion that was now mine. The power was intoxicating. I could simply refuse to renew her lease, and she'd be forced to move her entire business. Or I could triple the rent, bleeding her dry with the very money Mark had given her. The possibilities were endless. But I knew I had to be smart. This couldn't be emotional. It had to be a business decision. Clean, professional, undeniable. The night before the closing, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, Mark breathing softly beside me, and I felt the weight of what I was about to do. Was this right? Was this who I wanted to be? A person who schemed in secret? Then I thought of his words. "She'll get over it, she always does." He hadn't just stolen money. He had stolen my identity. He had tried to define me as a passive, forgiving doormat. This wasn't just about getting revenge on him and Clara. It was about reclaiming my own story. It was about proving him wrong. Proving that I was not the person he thought I was. The next day, I signed the final papers. The keys to the property would be mailed to the P.O. box I had set up for the LLC. It was done. I walked out of the lawyer's office into the bright afternoon sun. The city seemed different, sharper, clearer. I felt a sense of calm I hadn't felt in months. That's when I realized I wasn't just buying a building. I was buying back my future, one that he would have no part in. The keys arrived a week later in a plain manila envelope, delivered to the anonymous P.O. box I'd set up. They were cold and heavy in my hand, a small, jagged collection of metal that represented more power than I had ever held in my life. That night, after Mark was asleep, I drove to the property. The street was quiet, bathed in the orange glow of the streetlights. I parked across the street and just looked at it, my building. The lights inside Blooms by Clara were off, but the large display windows were artfully lit. I could see the elaborate arrangements, the chic, rustic shelves, the whole aesthetic that our savings had paid for. It looked like a perfect little jewel box, a testament to her dream. I felt a strange detachment, like a scientist observing a specimen. There was no anger, no hot surge of rage, just a cold, clear sense of purpose. He thought I was the supporting character in his story. He was about to find out he was a minor plot point in mine. I got out of the car, crossed the street, and stood in front of the shop. I slid one of the new keys into the main building door. It turned with a satisfying, solid click. I didn't go in. I didn't need to. I just needed to know that I could, that I held the access. I pulled the key out, got back in my car, and drove home. Mark hadn't even stirred. The first few months of being a secret landlord were an education. I operated entirely through a property management company, a buffer that made JG Holdings an impenetrable fortress of anonymity. They handled the official communications, collected the rent checks, and dealt with any minor maintenance issues. Clara had no reason to suspect anything had changed, other than the name on her monthly invoices. At home, the performance continued. Mark was fully convinced we had weathered the storm. He was affectionate, attentive, and completely oblivious. He started bringing home brochures again, this time for smaller, more affordable houses in suburbs farther out. "It'll take us a bit longer, but we can still do it," he said one evening, spreading them out on the coffee table. His optimism was grotesque. I would nod and smile, feigning interest. I'd point to a picture of a little bungalow and say, "That one's nice." All the while, I was calculating property taxes and reviewing insurance policies for a building he didn't know I owned. The irony was thick enough to choke on. He would talk about financial responsibility, about being a team again. He'd say things like, "Honesty is so important, you know? We can't have secrets." And I would just agree, my face a mask of serene sincerity. Each lie he told himself about our recovery was a justification for the lie I was living. 4 months after I took ownership, with Clara's lease renewal looming, I gave my property manager their instructions. It was time to make the first move. A formal, legally vetted letter was sent to Blooms by Clara. It was simple and professional. It stated that the building was under new ownership and that, per the terms of her existing lease, a review of the renewal option would be conducted. It requested a copy of her business's financial statements for the past 2 years. A standard, if slightly aggressive, request from a new commercial landlord. It was the first stone tossed into her placid little pond. I knew it wouldn't take long for the ripples to reach my shore. It took 3 days. Mark came home from work looking troubled. He dropped his keys on the counter with a loud clatter and sighed heavily. I was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. I didn't turn around. "Rough day?" I asked, my voice casual. "You could say that," he muttered. He opened the fridge, stared inside for a moment, then closed it without taking anything. Silence, I kept chopping. The rhythmic tap of the knife on the cutting board was the only sound. "I had lunch with Clara," he finally said. "Here we go." "Oh," I said, my tone still neutral. "How is she?" "Not great. She's having some trouble with her new landlord." I paused my chopping and turned to face him, arranging my features into a look of mild concern. "Oh no, what's going on?" He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I now recognized as his tell for agitation and guilt. "This new company that bought the building, they're being really aggressive. They're demanding to see all her books, making it sound like they might not renew her lease. Well, that doesn't seem fair, I said, pouring a glass of water and handing it to him. But I guess they're allowed to do that, aren't they? It's their property. My words, so reasonable and detached, seemed to frustrate him. It's not just business, Jas. It feels personal. They're a faceless corporation, JG. Holdings or something. They're trying to bully her out. I took a slow sip of my own water. Why would they do that? If she's a good tenant and pays her rent on time, what's the problem? This was the beautiful part. I was forcing him to articulate the situation, to explain the nuances of his betrayal to me as if I were a clueless bystander. That's the thing, he said, his voice dropping. The business, it's still getting on its feet. The renovation was expensive. The numbers aren't spectacular. She's worried that if they see her books, they'll use it as an excuse to kick her out or double the rent. I just stared at him, letting the implication hang in the air. The renovation we paid for was so expensive that it made the business look like a failure on paper. The money he stole hadn't saved her. It had just dug a deeper, prettier hole for her to fall into. That's terrible, I said, and the lie was so perfect, I almost believed it myself. I walked over and put a comforting hand on his arm. I'm sure it will be fine. These things usually work themselves out. He looked at me, his eyes full of gratitude. You're being so amazing about this, he said softly. I know hearing about her is still hard. It means a lot that you can be so supportive. I smiled. We're a team, remember. Your friends are my friends. That night, I felt a chilling sense of mastery. I had him. He was confiding in me, seeking comfort from me about the very problem I was creating for him. He was so blinded by his own narrative, the one where I was the forgiving wife who had gotten over it, that he couldn't see the truth right in front of him. He was playing checkers, and I had been playing chess from the very beginning. A month later, with her financials submitted and reviewed, it was time for the second move. The checkmate. I spent a week with my lawyer, drafting the official renewal offer. It had to be a work of art, a perfect trap with 2 doors, both leading to the same conclusion. The letter my property manager sent to Clara presented 2 options for her 5-year lease renewal. Option A was the picture of corporate greed. It cited rising property values and market analysis, and proposed a rent increase of 200%. It was a figure so astronomically high, so commercially unreasonable, that it was designed to be impossible. It would bankrupt her in 3 months. This was the option that would make JG Holdings look like a ruthless, profit-driven monster. Option B was the picture of corporate benevolence. It offered to renew her lease for the full 5 years at the current, below-market rate, not a single dollar increase, a landlord's gift. It came with only one simple condition. The lease agreement contained a new clause, under the heading Proof of Financial Solvency. The clause stated that the tenant must demonstrate a zero-debt balance for all initial business capitalization. Specifically, it required proof that the $50,000 investment used for the 2022 renovation and relaunch had been repaid in full to the original private lender. A certified bank statement showing the transfer would be required before the lease could be executed. I had named the exact amount, the exact year. I had weaponized the loan he had lied about. The letter gave her 30 days to choose an option and comply with its terms. The explosion came a week later. I was reading a book on the couch when Mark burst through the door. He didn't even say hello. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of fury and panic. He was waving his phone in his hand. "You are not going to believe this," he said, his voice trembling with rage. I put my book down slowly. "Believe what?" "That landlord, JG Holdings. They're not just bullies, they're criminals. They're trying to blackmail Clara." He explained the 2 options, his voice rising with every word. He paced back and forth in our small living room like a caged animal. "They want her to prove she paid back that money. How could they even know about that? They must have illegally accessed her records or something. This is insane." I let him rant. I let him spin his theories of corporate espionage and illegal harassment. I sat there, a picture of calm, and let him exhaust his fury. When he finally stopped, breathing heavily in the middle of the room, I spoke. "That does seem strange," I said, my voice measured. "The part about the loan. But the other option, the rent increase, that's legal, isn't it?" He scoffed. "Legal? It's predatory. There's no way she can afford that. They know it. They're trying to force her out. But this other thing, this demand, it's a message. I raised an eyebrow. A message? What are you talking about? He finally looked at me, truly looked at me, and his desperation was plain. I have to help her, Jas. I can't let this happen. I'm the one who got her into this. How? I asked, the question sharp and pointed. How can you help her? You can't pay them 200% more in rent every month. And you can't pay back a $50,000 loan that was never a loan to begin with. He stared at me, the color drained from his face. I hadn't raised my voice, I had simply stated the truth. What did you just say? He stammered. I stood up from the couch. The time for acting was over. The curtain was coming down. I said, I repeated, my voice as calm and cold as a frozen lake, that you can't pay back a loan that was never a loan. It was a gift you bought with our future. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The gears were turning in his head, the pieces clicking into place with horrifying slowness. He was looking at me, but he was seeing something else, someone else. How do you know about that? He whispered. How could you possibly know the exact amount? I walked over to the small wooden chest where I kept important documents. I took out a single key, not a key to the building, a key to our old safe deposit box. A box he thought I'd forgotten about. I slid it onto the coffee table. Then, from the same chest, I took out the manila envelope from my P.O. box. I tipped it over, and the set of keys to his ex-girlfriend's prison spilled out, clattering onto the wood. They glinted under the lamplight. His eyes darted from my face to the keys, back to my face. Disbelief warred with a dawning, sickening comprehension. Jasmine, he breathed, the name a question, an accusation, a plea. I didn't need to say a word. He knew. J.G. Holdings, I said quietly. My grandmother's name was Josephine Graham. It was her runaway fund, Mark. The one she told me every woman should have. He sank onto the sofa, as if his legs had given out. The reality of what I had done crashed down on him. The weeks of my quiet smiles, my feigned support, my patient listening, it all replayed in his mind, recast in a terrifying new light. It wasn't forgiveness. It was reconnaissance. You bought the building. I bought the building, I confirmed. I'm the faceless corporation. I'm the one demanding to see the books. I'm the one who knows the business is failing because you poured our life into a black hole of nostalgia. He just shook his head, looking from the keys to me. Why? It was the only word he could manage. I walked over to the window and looked out at the city lights. Because you wrote me off, I said, my voice soft but unwavering. You sat there in the safety of our home, and you typed a message to another woman dismissing my pain. You told her not to worry. You told her I would get over it. You told her I always do. I turned back to face him. The mask was completely gone now. He was seeing the real me for the first time in months, the woman he had created. You made a prediction, Mark. You were so sure of who I was. Stable, predictable. The wife who just gets over it. I picked up one of the keys from the table, turning it over in my fingers. You were wrong. That's when I realized that revenge wasn't loud and explosive. It was the quiet, undeniable click of a key turning in a lock you never even knew existed. Mark didn't rage. He didn't yell. He just crumpled. The arrogance and certainty that had defined him for so long evaporated, leaving behind a hollowed-out man. He stared at the keys on the table as if they were venomous snakes. So this was all a lie? He finally whispered, looking up at me. The last few months, us, talking, laughing, it was all fake. No, I said, and this, at least, was the truth. It was all very real. It was a real-time demonstration of exactly what you lost when you decided our partnership was optional. I left him there on the couch and went into our bedroom. I didn't have much to pack. I had been quietly moving my most important belongings, personal documents, sentimental items, my grandmother's photograph, to a small storage unit for weeks. All that was left was clothing. I pulled out a suitcase and began to fold my sweaters, my hands steady. The sounds from the living room were non-existent, just a heavy, defeated silence. He appeared in the doorway a few minutes later, looking lost and diminished. What happens now? He asked. Now, I said, not looking up from my packing, you call Clara, you tell her that you can't help her. You tell her that the money is gone and that her guardian angel has had his wings clipped. What she does after that is her problem. Her business, her dream, her consequences. And us? His voice was barely audible. I finally stopped and looked at him. There was no pity in my heart. There was nothing. just a vast, empty space where my love for him used to be. There is no us, Mark. There hasn't been since the day you emptied our bank account. You just didn't know it yet. You were married to a ghost. I zipped the suitcase and lifted it off the bed. I walked past him, out of the bedroom that no longer felt like mine. I stopped at the bookshelf in the living room and picked up the little ceramic bird, the one we'd bought for a future that would never happen. I held it in my palm for a moment, then placed it gently on the coffee table, right next to the keys. A final, silent statement. Your dream is gone. So is mine. Here are the pieces. I walked to the door. I didn't look back. Jasmine, wait, he pleaded. Please, we can fix this. I'll do anything. I paused with my hand on the doorknob. The time for fixing things was before you betrayed me, I said. The time for anything was before you chose her. All that's left now is the bill, and it's time for you to pay it. I opened the door and walked out, closing it softly behind me. The click of the latch was the most definitive sound I'd ever heard. I never found out for sure what happened to Blooms by Clara. I heard through a mutual acquaintance, months later, that the shop had closed down. The beautiful new sign was taken down, the windows papered over. I instructed my property management company to find a new, reliable tenant. A bakery, I think. I didn't care. Destroying her business was never the point. The shop was just the stage. The point was forcing Mark to see the consequences of his choices, to understand that my respect was not a renewable resource he could deplete and expect to be replenished. I filed for divorce the next week. It was uncontested. He gave me everything I asked for, not out of generosity, but out of defeat. We sold the apartment. I used my share, along with the steady income from my commercial property, to buy a small condo for myself. It wasn't the house with the garden. It was small, on the 5th floor of a tall building, with a little balcony that looked out over the city. It was quiet, and it was all mine. Some nights I sit out on that balcony and I think about it all. The pain, the betrayal, the intricate, silent war I waged from inside my own marriage. There's no triumph. There's no gloating. There's just peace. I learned that true strength isn't about forgiving someone who isn't sorry. It's about respecting yourself enough to walk away from the person they've shown themselves to be. He mocked my loyalty and underestimated my resolve. He thought I was a chapter in his story he could easily turn. He never imagined I was writing my own book all along. The little ceramic bird sits on my new windowsill. It's not a reminder of a lost dream anymore. It's a reminder that sometimes the only way to get your wings is to build your own nest, far away from the cage you didn't even know you were in. I stopped waiting for his apology. Peace, I learned, was mine to give myself. If this story reminded you that your own strength is worth fighting for, please subscribe. There are more tales here of quiet courage and the justice we make for ourselves. Thank you for listening.